Apple currently sells a lot of different iPhone models, so in this video we're going to break down all the key characteristics of each model to help you decide which iPhone is going to provide the best value for you. So we're going to start with the most premium, expensive iPhones, and we'll work our way down to the base model iPhones as we move throughout the video. So starting off with the iPhone 17 Pros, which are the best iPhones money can buy that you probably don't need. The iPhone 17 Pro comes in two sizes, being the smaller 6.3-inch model, which costs $1,100, and the larger 6.9-inch Max model, which costs $1,200. And just for reference, the base model iPhone 17, which we're of course going to discuss in detail in just a little bit, costs $800. So the displays on the iPhone 17 Pros are very sharp, bright, and smooth with their ProMotion 120Hz refresh rates, but this display tech is not exclusive to the iPhone 17 Pros, as the base model iPhone 17 also has the exact same display tech and shares the exact same display size as the smaller iPhone 17 Pro, being 6.3 inches as well. The iPhone 17 Pros feature an aluminum housing with that new large camera plateau featuring the three 48 megapixel camera lenses and the glass window for wireless charging. Once again though, the base iPhone 17 is also constructed of the same aluminum and glass materials, albeit in a slightly different design. The iPhone 17 Pro's three 48 megapixel rear cameras include, of course, the main lens, the ultra-wide lens, and its specialty being the telephoto zoom lens, while the base model iPhone 17 only has two 48 megapixel rear cameras, being the main lens and the ultra-wide lens. The iPhone 17 Pro's telephoto zoom lens allows for drastically superior zoom capabilities in comparison to the base model iPhone 17. The iPhone 17 Pros also have a handful of genuinely pro-level camera features for people that really take their iPhone photography and videography seriously, such as the ability to shoot in ProRAW, ProRes video recording up to 4K at 120 frames per second with external recording, Genlock support, and more. Basically things that if you don't know what they are, you're never going to use them, but if you do know what they are, you're really going to appreciate them. And guys, as much as my iPhone is my most used go-to device throughout a typical day, I also use my iPad quite a bit for content consumption and note-taking, and for the last few weeks I've been using today's sponsor MetaPen's Air 8 Pro X, and it's been a game changer for my note-taking workflow. Thanks to the AirFlex tip, it delivers a smooth, natural-feeling writing experience similar to how writing on paper feels. It has just enough resistance to make it feel exactly like an actual pencil writing on paper. It's also remarkably silent, perfect for working in quiet environments like libraries or cafes with none of the tapping and clicking noises that other styluses produce. The Air 8 Pro X also features a very pencil-like design with its grippy texture and its on-off button being the red eraser tip. It's also only 11 grams. It has ultra-long battery life that lasts for literal weeks thanks to its 26-hour standby. You even get an included storage slot that you can attach to your iPad for easy access, and a few backup replacement nib tips as well that you can easily screw on and off. The impressive value proposition that the MetaPen Air 8 Pro X offers in comparison to the Apple Pencil is honestly a no-brainer, as you get everything you need at an unbeatable price. So if you're looking to take your iPad note-taking experience to the next level, click on the link in the video description down below to check out the MetaPen Air 8 Pro X. And big thanks to MetaPen for sponsoring this video. The battery performance of the iPhone 17 Pros is the best you're going to get across the lineup. This being said though, it is worth noting that the battery capacities of the iPhone 17 Pros that are eSIM only are larger than the capacities of the versions of the iPhone 17 Pros that still have a physical SIM card tray. So you'll get a little bit better battery performance if you have an eSIM only iPhone 17 Pro model. Now, whether you'll get an eSIM only version of the iPhone 17 Pro or the version that still has a physical SIM card tray just entirely depends on what country you live in. I'll leave a link in the video description down below to where you can check if Apple sells eSIM only iPhone 17 Pros or the SIM card version of iPhone 17 Pros in your country. Either way though, the batteries on the iPhone 17 Pros are the best that you're going to get, with both the 6.3-inch and the 6.9-inch models being able to get the vast majority of people through a day of usage and then some. And this is great for device longevity, as when a phone has above average battery performance right after it launches, that means for the 1, 2, 3 years that follow, as the battery inevitably degrades over time, it will continue to have decent battery performance for a very long time. The larger iPhone 17 Pro Max, though, is just totally in a league of its own. If you just want to never worry about your battery dying at all throughout your day, the iPhone 17 Pro Max is undeniably the best iPhone to buy in 2026. The batteries of Pro Max and plus-sized iPhones have always been really good, but this year Apple really outdid themselves with the battery life on this phone. Not to discount the smaller 6.3-inch iPhone 17 Pro, which does offer phenomenal battery performance for a smaller, compact iPhone. The iPhone 17 Pros are powered by Apple's A19 Pro chip, which is the most advanced and future-proof iPhone processor out there that you won't even come close to actually using all the power of. It has so much headroom in terms of processing power. However, the base model iPhone 17 is powered by the standard A19 chip, which also has more than enough power and future-proofing than you'll ever need as well. I mean, here in 2026, the difference between the Pro level chips and the standard level chips is just so negligible for 99.9% of users. Unless you regularly push your iPhone to its absolute limit with very high-performing games or video editing, you're just never going to see the difference between a Pro level chip and a standard level chip. Now, what does set the iPhone 17 Pro models apart from the base model iPhone 17 is the vapor chamber cooling system that the 17 Pros have, which helps dissipate heat throughout the device a lot more effectively when performing extremely power-intense tasks, which is again something that's going to be useful for the most intense iPhone users out there. Maybe if you record hours of 4K video on end, or if you push your iPhone to the limit in some capacity, it's going to be useful, but again, 99% of users are not going to need this. So to put it simply, the only big advantages the iPhone 17 Pros have over the base model iPhone 17, which we're again going to discuss in detail in just a little bit, really just come down to three things. Having that telephoto zoom lens for a very sharp and long zoom, the better battery performance, and the option of having a much bigger screen with the Max phone. Those are the only reasons that most people should ever get a 17 Pro over a base model 17. Alright, so we have another iPhone in the quote-unquote premium sector to discuss before we get into discussing the base model iPhones, and that's the iPhone Air, which is a very technologically impressive device, it being Apple's thinnest iPhone ever. But honestly, it's an iPhone that almost nobody should actually buy. The iPhone Air has a 6.5-inch display, and it costs $1,000. The display is very sharp, bright, and smooth, as it also has a ProMotion 120Hz refresh rate. It's actually also the exact same display tech featured in the iPhone 17 Pros and in the base model iPhone 17. So every new iPhone that came out this past fall has the exact same display tech. The display size of 6.5 inches, however, is unique to the iPhone Air. It's sitting in between the 6.3-inch size of the base iPhone 17 and the smaller iPhone 17 Pro, and the largest 6.9-inch size of the iPhone 17 Pro Max. And I must say, even though this is a pretty big display of 6.5 inches, it feels much more manageable than any other phone of this size, just because of how thin and light it is. Especially when it comes to one-handed use, and just how thin and light it feels when it's in your pocket. It's only 5.6 millimeters thick and 5.8 ounces. The iPhone Air features a titanium housing for its razor-thin edges, and a glass back with a pretty large plateau at the top, housing the single 48-megapixel main lens. The iPhone Air undeniably features the most premium design in the current lineup, not only because of its impressive thinness, but also because it's the only iPhone in the current lineup that uses titanium instead of aluminum, which looks and feels more premium. The iPhone Air's biggest area of weakness is undeniably the camera, it only having a single 48-megapixel main lens, so no ultra-wide lens or telephoto zoom lens. The battery performance of the iPhone Air is surprisingly not bad. It does perform noticeably worse than the base model iPhone 17, but not drastically worse. It's totally enough battery to get most people through a day of usage. However, the issue here is longevity. If day one, fresh out of the box, the iPhone Air's battery performance is already slightly below average for what people expect out of a modern iPhone, in the 1, 2 to 3 years that follow, again, as the battery naturally degrades over time, it's only going to get worse. The iPhone Air's battery doesn't have a whole lot of headroom to age gracefully, making it not very future-proof, which is something that I think you should get when you spend $1,000 on a phone. The iPhone Air is powered by the A19 Pro chip, so the same chip that powers the iPhone 17 Pros. However, the version of the A19 Pro that the iPhone Air has one less GPU core than the version that the iPhone 17 Pros have. Of course, this is one of those differences that you're likely never ever going to notice in typical usage scenarios, unless you're in that very small group of people that really push their iPhones to the limit. Apple included the A19 Pro chip in the iPhone Air instead of the standard A19 chip, as in a phone as thin as this, energy efficiency is very important, and the A19 Pro chip is more energy efficient than the standard A19 chip. As much as this device is a delight to use and honestly feels like the future when you're holding it without a case, I can't recommend this phone to pretty much anybody other than tech enthusiasts who plan on upgrading their phones regularly, as unless having a very thin phone is the most important thing for you when buying a new iPhone, this phone is just objectively the worst iPhone in the current lineup, as you get only one main camera lens, so no 0.5 times ultra wide shots, and no telephoto zoom lens for a super close zoom. You get the worst battery performance of any iPhone in the lineup, that'll only get worse in the years that follow, all at a very steep price of $1,000, which is what Apple charged for the entry-level, top-of-the-line Pro iPhone last year with the 16 Pro. As much as I love the form factor, in its current form this generation, this phone is just not a good deal for 99% of people, and Apple's recent alleged sales numbers show that most people just aren't buying this iPhone, and I can't help but see why. And next, we have the base model iPhone 17, which absolutely nails all the fundamentals and then some for what most people need out of their iPhones in 2026. The base model iPhone 17 comes in only one size, being 6.3 inches, and it costs $800. The display is very sharp, bright, and smooth with its ProMotion 120Hz refresh rate. As I mentioned earlier, it's the exact same display tech featured in the iPhone 17 Pro models and in the iPhone Air as well. And it features the exact same display size as the smaller iPhone 17 Pro, being 6.3 inches. This is the first time Apple is including the ProMotion 120Hz display refresh rate for the base model iPhone, which basically just means the display looks just as smooth as the more expensive Pro iPhones when scrolling and when animations are shown, which is great to see. The base model iPhone 17 features an aluminum housing with a glass back and a very small camera bump in comparison to the iPhone 17 Pros and the iPhone Air that features its two 48 megapixel camera lenses, which include the main lens and the ultra-wide lens. For most people, a rock-solid main 48 megapixel camera lens and an ultra-wide lens that's also 48 megapixels and can take great 0.5 times shots is going to be more than enough. The battery performance of the base model iPhone 17 is fantastic. It has more than enough power to get the vast majority of people through a day of usage. It's not going to be quite as good as the 6.3-inch iPhone 17 Pro, but you're not going to have any complaints with battery performance on this phone, unless you're coming from a Pro Max or Plus-sized iPhone, which of course are just in a total different league of their own for battery performance. But for a standard-sized phone, I mean 10 out of 10 for battery, it's one of this phone's strongest areas. And the fact that the battery performance is so good right now means that as the years go by and as the battery inevitably degrades over time as you use the phone, you'll continue to have good battery performance for years and years into using the device. The iPhone 17 is powered by the A19 chip, Apple's latest standard-level iPhone processor. It again has more than enough power and headroom for future proofing to last you many years. Here in 2026, iPhone chips get minimum 7 years of major iOS update support and remain very fast throughout their entire lifespan. Apple's base model iPhones have honestly always been the best value in the lineup from the very beginning. However, this year, the barrier between the 17 Pros and the standard 17 is thinner than ever, as throughout the accumulation of the last several generations, Apple has slowly brought over most of the features that used to make their Pro iPhones appealing to the base model iPhones. I mean, looking at the front of the base model iPhone 17 compared to the iPhone 17 Pro, there is no difference, either aesthetically or in terms of specs. They both feature the exact same display size and the exact same display tech and the exact same amount of bezel around the screen. I feel like we've finally reached a point where the features that Apple holds back just for the Pro iPhones iPhones are genuinely for pro users. And this effect indirectly makes the base model iPhone 17 a better deal than it's ever been here at $800. I mean, you get a great camera system, fantastic battery performance, the latest chip that has more power than you'll ever need, at the same base price of $800 that it's been for the last 5 generations. And next, we have the base model iPhone 16s, so last year's base model iPhones, which are still very solid iPhones. However, I think there's only one scenario where it actually makes sense buying one of these, which we'll get into in just a little bit. So the base iPhone 16 actually comes in 2 sizes, being the smaller 6.1-inch iPhone 16, which costs $700, and a larger 6.7-inch Plus model, which costs $800. Apple unfortunately discontinued the Plus variant for the standard tier iPhones this year with the iPhone 17 series. However, they still sell last year's iPhone 16 Plus. The displays on the base iPhone 16s are solid. They're very sharp and bright. However, they have a maximum refresh rate of 60 Hz, so you don't get that smoother looking ProMotion 120 Hz refresh rate on these iPhones, which isn't going to be a huge deal for most people outside of the hardcore tech community, but will result in scrolling and animations not looking quite as smooth as they do on newer and more premium iPhones. Just like the base model iPhone 17, the base model iPhone 16s here also feature an aluminum housing with a glass back and a relatively small camera bump to house their 2 camera lenses, being one 48 megapixel main lens and one 12 megapixel ultra-wide lens. And the ultra-wide lens isn't quite as high quality as it is on the base model iPhone 17, as it is 12 megapixels here on the base iPhone 16s, as opposed to 48 megapixels on the base iPhone 17, but honestly, you're very likely not going to notice any difference in your actual usage. The camera system on the base model iPhone 16s are rock solid and more than enough for most people. The battery performance on both of the base model iPhone 16s are fantastic. Similar to the base model iPhone 17, on the smaller 6.1-inch base model iPhone 16, you can expect above average battery performance for a standard sized phone. And of course, the larger 6.7-inch 16 Plus is in a league of its own, it being a larger plus sized iPhone. The iPhone 16 Plus is going to provide more than enough battery performance to get you through a day of usage and then some. Other than having a bigger screen, the biggest benefit of having a Plus or Pro Max sized iPhone is basically just never having to worry about your battery dying throughout a typical day. The battery performance of the 16 Plus isn't going to be quite as good as the latest 17 Pro Max, but it's certainly going to be a lot better than any of the standard sized iPhones in the lineup. The base model iPhone 16s are powered by Apple's standard A18 chip, which, as is the case with any recent iPhone processor, it has more than enough power and headroom that you'll likely ever need. I mean, here in 2026, it would be pretty silly to make an iPhone purchasing decision based on a chipset, as all the iPhones Apple is currently selling in this current lineup have either this year's line of chips or last year's, so both brand new essentially. All this being said, I think the only scenario where it's really worth buying a base model iPhone 16 is if you want the cheapest big screened iPhone that you could get, and I'm talking about the larger 6.7-inch iPhone 16 Plus, which gets you, again, that 6.7-inch iPhone experience for just $800, which is the same cost as the current base model iPhone 17. The only major drawback in choosing a standard tier iPhone 16 over the standard tier iPhone 17 in terms of specs is mainly just lacking that 120 Hz ProMotion display refresh rate, and I think a lot of people value having a larger screen more than something like this. And considering Apple no longer makes a Plus version for the base model iPhone 17, the iPhone 16 Plus is just a phenomenal deal for anybody that wants a big screened iPhone but doesn't want to pay $1,200 for the latest and greatest iPhone 17 Pro Max. So it's definitely worth keeping in mind if you just want that big screened iPhone experience and you don't care about having all the pro grade features that you'd get on the 17 Pro Max. You could get it with the 16 Plus for $800, which is the same cost as the base model iPhone 17. I think a lot of people probably don't know that when they're just walking into the store and buying a phone. They might end up buying the $1,200 iPhone 17 Pro Max just for having the bigger screen, not knowing that they could just get the 16 Plus, which basically has the same screen. I mean, the difference between 6.7 inches on the 16 Plus and 6.9 inches on the 17 Pro Max is basically negligible. And as for the smaller 6.1-inch base model iPhone 16, which again costs $700, in my opinion, if you're looking for a standard-sized iPhone and you're considering this one, If you can afford paying an additional $100, I would recommend going for the base model iPhone 17 instead at $800 if you're already prepared to spend $700 on the 6.1-inch base iPhone 16 here. As with the base model iPhone 17, you get a slightly larger 6.3-inch screen, and you get that ProMotion 120Hz refresh rate, which I think is worth $800 if you're already prepared to spend $700 on the 6.1-inch iPhone 16. But that being said, if you want to or need to save that additional $100, the base model 6.1-inch iPhone 16 offers a fantastic experience and is a phone that will last a very long time. And the final iPhone in the current lineup is the iPhone 16e, which is Apple's budget version of the iPhone 16. The iPhone 16e has a 6.1-inch display and it costs $600. And while I do think the base model iPhone 17 is the best overall value in the current lineup, if you're on a tighter budget, the iPhone 16e delivers a rock-solid budget iPhone experience, especially considering how insanely expensive all the other options in the current lineup have gotten. The display on the iPhone 16e is quite sharp, however it's not able to get nearly as bright as all the other iPhones in the lineup, and also it of course has a maximum 60Hz display refresh rate, meaning animations and scrolling won't look quite as smooth as it does on some of the newer and more expensive iPhones. And it features the less premium looking notch at the top to house the front-facing camera and the Face ID sensors, as opposed to the sleeker and more modern looking dynamic island cutout that's featured on all the other iPhones in the current lineup. But it's a full 6.1-inch sized screen, and I don't think any of these drawbacks are going to be that big of a deal for most people. The iPhone 16e features an aluminum housing with a glass back and a single camera lens on the back, being a 48 megapixel main lens. The major drawback with the camera system on the 16e is of course that it doesn't have the ultra wide lens. So you're not able to take any 0.5 times shots like you can on the higher end base model iPhone 16 and iPhone 17. But the single lens that it does have captures great images. The battery performance of the iPhone 16e is fantastic. It's actually one of its strongest characteristics, due to the 16e including the biggest battery for an iPhone of this size. The battery performance that you're going to get on the iPhone 16e is going to be a little bit better than you get on the higher end base model 6.1-inch iPhone 16, likely putting it at or around the same battery performance that you'd get on the latest base model 6.3-inch iPhone 17, or maybe even a little bit better depending on your usage. The fact that this is the case for the cheapest iPhone in Apple's current lineup is very impressive, especially in an area like battery performance. That's one of the most important things for any iPhone, especially for a budget iPhone like this that users are very likely going to be holding onto for many years. And as I've mentioned several times throughout this video, when a phone starts off with above average battery performance at the beginning of its life, that just means that the battery performance is going to age gracefully as the battery inevitably degrades over time, as you have some extra headroom, basically just ensuring that the phone will continue to have good battery performance throughout its lifespan. The iPhone 16e is powered by the very same standard A18 chip that the higher end base iPhone 16s are powered by, which means you're getting a very new chip that has more than enough power and headroom to make it future-proofed for years to come. Now, the version of the standard A18 chip that's in the iPhone 16e does have one less GPU core than the version of the standard A18 chip that's featured in the higher end base model iPhone 16s. But again, as I've said, you're never going to notice a difference like this unless you're in the top 1% of iPhone users that absolutely push their phones to the limit. And unfortunately, the iPhone 16e lacks MagSafe support, which is Apple's ecosystem for their magnetic wireless chargers and some other accessories that snap to the back of iPhones. It does have wireless charging, but you just don't get the support for the magnetic charging accessories. This is definitely unfortunate, but I don't think it's going to be a deal breaker for most people. The only big drawback to this phone is the fact that it lacks an ultra wide lens. Other than that, all the drawbacks to this phone are far outweighed by all the positive things about this phone. I mean, for $600, you're getting a full-size 6.1-inch display, fantastic battery performance, and a very new and powerful processor. As much as, again, I think the current base model iPhone 17 offers the best value in the current lineup at $800, if your budget is a bit tighter, the $600 iPhone 16e here offers a solid value. A lot of people in the tech space absolutely slam this phone, saying it's such a ripoff, but I honestly think those opinions come from the perspective of tech enthusiasts. The reality is, for most people, the 16e is a great iPhone. Now, it is worth noting that Apple is very likely about to release an incremental update to this phone, being the iPhone 17e, in just a few months, in February or March of 2026, to give it the new A19 chip, as opposed to the A18 chip in the current iPhone 16e, so just a minor spec bump. So if you wait a couple months, you'll likely get a slightly better version of this phone for probably the same price. But buying the current iPhone 16e right now is perfectly fine, as again, it's very future-proofed, and the next generation iPhone 17e is likely just going to be a spec bump over this current version. So guys, as much as Apple's iPhone lineup is seemingly confusing as there's more options than ever, I think it's actually a good thing, as you can find exactly what you need and what you're looking for, and not anything more. And I know that the prices of pretty much every iPhone tier has gone up over the last several years, and obviously no one's happy about that, but at least we can maybe take solace in the fact that the base model iPhones have continued to get better and better, so most people probably don't need a pro tier iPhone. Let me know which iPhone you're currently using in 2026 in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.